Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Interviewing the Legends. I'm your host, Ray Shasho. Mark Vickness began his musical training on piano at age 6. The road from there to the composer, modern fingerstyle guitarist he is today included a bachelor's and master's degree in composition, studies in classical piano, guitar, sitar, and tabla. Uh, Years as performing jazz guitarist, composer, and arranger, several film scores, and decades of recording and performing as the instrumental half of the acoustic fusion duo Glass House, which has released 3 CDs, 2 EPs, and a host of widely viewed YouTube videos. Mark's performing experience spans a huge range of genres from free improv to West African drum and dance ensembles, from Motown and funk bands to big band, jazz, and orchestral conducting. Schooled in composition by Pulitzer Prize winning composer Mel Powell, Mark has recorded and performed with world renowned musicians, including 2 time Grammy winners, the Turtle Island String Quartet, legendary bassist Michael Manring, and guitarist Alex DiGrassi, and Don Ross. Following the release of Places in 2017 and Interconnected in 2020, composer guitarist Mark Vickness announces the release of In the Rain Shadow with a newly expanded group of MVI, Mark Vickness Interconnected. Please welcome multi-instrumentalist, composer, and arranger Mark Vickness to Interviewing the Legends. Hello there, Mark.
Hey there, Ray. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure, man. Are you also an attorney?
I am.
Very cool. You know, there's a lot of musicians that are attorneys.
That
That's
is true.
crazy.
That's true.
Yeah, I saw your website. I just had on Mark Cusimano. He's got a band called Fastest Land Animal. He was in The Cringe. He's an attorney. He's also Rachel Ray's husband.
Uh-huh.
Roger Stevens from Blind Melon. He's an attorney.
Uh-huh.
Don Brewer from Grand Funk he studied law. I don't think he made it all the way through and got the bar, but it boggles the mind how many attorneys are in the music business.
Yeah, it's interesting.
What kind of law do you
I represent people who get injured on the job, so it's workers' comp.
Okay, I could have used you, man, because I got injured on the job.
Oh, anytime.
I actually settled.
Good enough.
Yeah, I was hurt on the job working with FedEx.
Oh, okay.
It took a while, but who knows? Maybe I could have gotten more money from you. I want to talk about the new album. Okay, first of all, In the Rain Shadow. The official release date was May 15th. Here's what I said about it. It's alluring music essential to serene the soul. I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was an incredible album.
Thank you.
How long did it take you to record this?
Well, the whole process, I mean, I started writing these pieces in 2020.
Okay.
And so the whole process of writing and recording and then mixing and everything was about 2.5 to 3 years.
Oh wow, that's a long time.
Yep, it's a long time.
Yeah, and you got your inspiration for this album. I think from the when you moved, I guess, to California, the Owens Valley. Is that where it started?
Yeah, so my wife and I have lived in Oakland for decades, and it's really as a result of COVID that we were able to work remotely and get a house here in the mountains where we had been backpacking for literally for 30 plus years. So
Hmm.
we're very familiar with this area and we absolutely love it on the eastern side of the Sierra mountain range. But you know, COVID, as devastating as it was, it presented us with this opportunity. So we wound up being able to get a house here, and it really changed my sort of perception of the world, if you will.
Sure.
I came to understand things like, you know, feng shui and stuff that I never really gave much credence to, because I'd always just lived either near or in a city my whole life. And so I'm just a city boy, having backpacked a lot in the mountains, but you always come back to the city. But living in the mountains is a whole another deal.
Hmm. What kind of animals do you have out there? Are there mountain lions and bears and that kind of thing?
Mountain lion, yeah, mountain
Really?
lion, bears. There's a lot of deer around.
Huh.
Yeah.
It doesn't worry you, huh? The mountain lions?
No, no, it does not. The people that worry about them are the people who have dogs.
Okay.
Yeah, because occasionally a mountain lion, if it's not, if it's a little off kilter, so to speak,
Right.
will attack a dog if you're out walking a dog. And we've known people who've had that happen.
And we have a lot of alligators, of course, here in Florida. We've gotten used to them. You go on the golf course and you just kind of walk right over them, you know.
There you
But
go.
the thing that's become a nuisance here is the coyotes, which I know
Yeah.
you guys got a lot, you
Oh, for
know.
sure. Yeah.
And I don't know why, but Florida's never had tons of coyotes, but we do now.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's crazy. I got to get used to that.
Yeah.
Um, I like some of the titles on this, and it's I guess came from a lot of geological or you know ex- weather related things that you experience daily. And one thing I never knew about was the rain shadow. Talk
Yeah.
about the rain shadow. Shadow.
Yeah, so the rain shadow is an interesting thing. When you live close to the sort of high slope of the end of a mountain range, um, there can be wind patterns that will stop moisture from coming all the way past the mountains.
Hmm.
So they call that the rain shadow, because you could be getting a ton of moisture, you know, 5 miles away,
Right.
and then it comes to a stop. Here at the valley where we are is high desert territory, which is why the first piece is titled High Desert. And so on average, here at the house, we get about 5 inches of rain a year. Whereas, you know, just a little ways west of us, the mountains will be getting just tons of snow. So it's really an interesting phenomenon.
That's really interesting. I never I got actually got an education
Nice.
from the album. And the song in the rain shadow. You mentioned that the guitar is tuned very low, and it has some resonance that kind of generated from how the Indian string instruments get their sound as well. Talk about that track.
Yeah, so that track came about like quite a few of the other tracks, from me sitting here improvising. So I'll come up with a tuning that I either become aware of from some other player or that I come up with myself, and
Right.
then the process of just exploring that tuning. And so I was doing that with this particular super low tuning that I learned from a wonderful British player. His name is John Gong. And I came up with the chord progression that begins the piece. And it sort of blossomed from there. It was a very warm and comfortable and comforting sound to me. And I could have just played that 8-bar chord progression for an hour. And that once I had that progression and I recorded it, then I went to my keyboard here and came up with the violin melody that is the second thing that happens. And once I had those two things, the the piece was essentially written.
I I think it's very intelligent the way you can put you know these um, these things that inspire you, and then put it into an instrumental song, and then you get that feeling of exactly what you're trying to accomplish. I mean, that's cinematic, I guess, is one of the words that comes to mind when you do this. And it takes a special skill to do that, and you've accomplished it in this album. You
Thank
really
you.
have.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I really love it. I mean, if you're into ambient music, jazz, fusion, um, any of those things, you're going to love this album. Because it's I've always loved that kind of music because it's just very peaceful, and it goes right to your soul, and makes you forget about everything else, all the bad stuff in this world.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm glad you said that because part of what this was about for me was dealing with the years of COVID,
Right.
and just how awful that was and how isolating it was. And I really was trying to create music that would make people feel sort of a warmth, and to the extent music can do it, a sense of community. And this particular group of musicians really enabled me to do that. It was wonderful working with them.
Yeah, well, they're incredible. You got a couple of Grammy Award winning musicians. Talk about those guys that are on the album.
Yeah, so the lineup for the album is a man named Matt Renzi from San Francisco. He's the wind player. Matt is an incredible wind player. Basically, if you can blow into it, he can make amazing music with it. So he plays mostly oboe and English horn,
right,
on the album, with some saxophone as well. He's an amazing saxophone player. So that's the wind section, so to speak. The string section is Mads Tolling and Joseph Ibert on cello, Mads on violin. Mads is a well-known player internationally. He's got 2 Grammys, and he's just an incredible player. I've worked with Mads for quite a number of years. And then we have Dan Feisley playing bass, both upright and electric. And Dan is also the recording engineer and the mix engineer. He's just one of these multi-talented guys who kind of make me angry, truthfully. I don't have that skill level. But Dan, for people who live in the San Francisco Bay Area, Dan is one of those, like if you're a musician and you deal with bass players, Dan.
right.
He doesn't put himself out there the way a lot of virtuoso players do. But man, the minute you do a gig or hear a gig with Dan or one of his recordings, you know how good he is.
Yeah.
So yeah, Dan and I have worked together for probably 10 years or more. And then we have a percussion section. Ty Burho is a virtuoso Indian tabla player. He is a disciple of Zakir Hussain, who is pretty much recognized as the greatest tabla player alive. And Ty, I've known Ty for probably 30 years. He taught me just enough tabla so that I can speak the language well enough to confuse him to come up with tabla parts. And he's just a magnificent player. And then, of course, the man I've known the longest in this group is the other percussion player, Ambi Gordy, who you have heard, and almost everybody's heard because he's done way over 100 film scores. He's one of the top session players in Los Angeles. He just finished the last John Williams score for the most recent Indiana Jones movie that's just,
Oh, really? Very cool.
coming out. Yeah. In fact, he was telling me about that session. He had just gotten done with John Williams, and I said, John Williams is like 90 years old. He said,
Yeah.
yeah, and he conducted the session himself,
Wow.
and it was like a 30-year-old. So yeah, MD is well known in the LA session area, and he's toured with just a ton of people. And I've known him since graduate school, way back when. I won't even tell you when that was, because
I was probably there with you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but he's an amazing player, and he plays instruments from all over the world. I mean, that is, he really helps in a super important way in this idea of interconnectedness, which is why the group is called Mark Vickness Interconnected. It's about trying to connect up a whole bunch of different musical traditions. And when you have someone who can play percussion instruments from all over the world, that really helps to achieve that. And so, he can take a Latin groove and easily translate that onto a West African drum, and we can combine that with a Indian tabla pattern, and now we're interconnected.
I love world music. I grew up in a household with my dad. My background, my dad's family was from Syria. So we had that Arabic flair in the house. My mom was Cuban. So we had that. And then me in my room playing Led Zeppelin. So it was quite an eclectic household, but I love world music, and I love all the instruments. So I that's why I really love your band and what you do as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I should mention, since you have Syrian roots, and plays quite a bit of doumbek, which is Middle Eastern drum that's used in countries in the Middle East. But he's got a collection of doumbeks, little small ones to these really big ones, and I got very enamored of the combination of tabla and doumbek on this record. It's really quite a cool combination.
Can you play the oud?
I do not play the oud at all. No. So that's just not something I have gotten to. Yeah,
we used to have all the family get-togethers. We used to have he wasn't my uncle, but I acted like he was an uncle. But he used to play the oud at all the parties. It was very, very cool. Yeah. I love the album, man. I gave it 5 stars. Some of the songs, some of the tracks, The Gorge, there's some electric guitar on there, right? Is that you?
It is me.
That sounds great, man.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
Kind of rocking out there.
Yeah, so that's me channeling my 20-year-old self. And it's interesting, when I wrote that section of the piece, I was hearing a soaring electric guitar solo over it. But on the other hand, I have been an acoustic guitar player, for many, many years now. I mean, steel string acoustic and classical guitar is really my thing. But I kept hearing this, and when we were recording the piece, I of course I have access to amazing soloists in the group, and so I had them record solos. We had a sax solo, we had a tenor sax solo, an alto sax solo. I had Mads play, a couple of violin solos, and you could tell these guys anything. It's like, why don't you do a bebop type solo?
Right.
Led Zeppelin, Jimmy Page. And I mean, they do it all. It's not a problem. But after recording those and listening them back, I just kept coming back to, I'm just hearing an electric guitar on this thing, and I'm going to have to bring out the electric guitar. And I hadn't touched the thing in probably 4 years. And I have a lovely PRS electric guitar, and I took it out and spent a couple hours, and there you have it.
You're going to have to play more of that.
Yeah.
It sounded great. It's kind of nice how it sneaks up on you. You didn't expect it, so it really stood out. I love it. Some of your other tracks, your son Will, he discovered ambient music, didn't he?
He did. Yeah.
Yeah, and stillness. You said for Will.
Mhm.
Um, Talk about that one. I guess Will kind of like Brian Eno. Was one of his favorites, I guess. But that's a good track. I love that track. Stillness.
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting with my son. He reminds me of me when I was his age because he's such a passionate music lover. He kind of has to have music going. Like if he goes in to brush his teeth or something, he got to have a speaker in there.
Right.
And I was the exact same way. It used to drive my father insane.
Mm-hmm.
And so you go by his room, this happened a couple of years ago. I go by his room and I hear like some Brian Eno and it's not like I turned him on to it either. I did not. He's just finding this stuff. And next thing I know, he's got a whole collection of it on his computer and stuff like that. And so that, sort of rekindled me listening to a bunch of that music because I used to listen to that stuff
Sure.
decades ago. And so, yeah, it inspired, particularly the first roughly minute and a half of that piece is very much just long tones, violin, cello, English horn, long tones, just these lush chords. And Dan put a ton of reverb on them. And you just get that really lush sound. So yeah, I was happy to have that.
Yeah, you mentioned it, a certain kind of stillness that is a unique to the high desert when the weather is calm. Eyes closed, you can feel the vastness. These things combine to inspire this piece. Love it. Yeah, I love your references to the to the weather and the moods around you. That's great. I love it. Here in Florida, we get a lot of hotness, so that's about all we got. Except when there's a hurricane.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. I kind of missed the fall. I'm originally from the DC area, so I kind of missed the fall.
Yeah.
Rupak for Ty. You know what that sounded like a little bit? It sounded like "God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen." Do you hear that at all?
Well, I'll tell you where that. Well, I'll tell you what the genesis of that piece was. So we were doing a recording session in Oakland,
Right.
and I had both MB and Ty. And after the session was done, we went out to have some lunch, the three of us. And I was saying that I really wanted to do a percussion piece, a tabla solo piece in 7 beats. And Rupak, that word, is the name of the classical Indian pattern,
Right.
that is 7 beats. It's divided 3 + 2 + 2. And it's one of my favorite rhythmic patterns to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and of course, Ty taught it to, well, actually, I probably knew Rupak even before I met Ty. But anyway, so we were sitting at the table and they, as soon as I said that, they were both like, oh yeah, absolutely. You got to do that. And once the idea gets in the brain, that was the last piece to get written. And actually all the other pieces had already been written and recorded. And then I'm like, okay, this has to happen. And so, yeah, that piece got written fairly quickly because, the whole second half of the piece was essentially for Ty to compile this giant tabla solo,
Mm-hmm.
which he did. And the melody part, to my ears, actually got a little bit inspired by some Stravinsky.
Okay.
There's some Stravinsky melodies that are sort of embedded in that little melody. But yeah, I love what Ty did with that. It's like a sort of a textbook study in what you can do with this 7-beat pattern, and the instruments are just there to support what he's doing.
Is that also based on a composition? Is it Ala Raka?
Ala Raka, yeah. So
Yeah.
So Ty knew Alaraka.
Hmm.
Alaraka is, if I got the family history correct, I believe is Zakir Hussein's father, and was Ravi Shankar's accompanist,
Oh,
was Ravi
wow.
Shankar's fiddle
Huh.
player. And Ty was the tour manager for Zakir Hussain for a very long time. And he was very steeped in classical Indian music for many years. Um, and so he knew all these guys. And so Alaraka, I believe, taught him the composition that he used as a basis for doing the solo in Rupak,
Very
which
cool.
that really moves me.
Mm.
I just love that kind of connection.
I saw Ravi Shankar and his orchestra with George Harrison back
Oh
in
wow!
was 74, I think. You know,
Yeah.
I think that was the last tour Harrison did in the States. You
Uh-huh.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, that was interesting. Very, very interesting. Good concert. But George's voice was all messed up. I think he
Yeah.
had a cold or something during that tour. How do you pronounce it? Is it alluvial? Alluvial fans?
That's exactly right. Alluvial fans. Yep.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Which kind of demonstrates your finger style on the track, right? In a way,
Yeah, it starts with sort of traditional right hand finger picking type
right?
stuff. And after that section, it actually, I believe, the entire rest of the piece is both hands on the fingerboard, which is very common for me. It's a very common modern fingerstyle technique that you're just pressing down with both hands on the fingerboard.
I'm going to mention to my audience how cool the finger style is and the legends that actually use it. Um, Chet Atkins,
Mm-hmm.
okay. Jeff Beck actually had it. He never used a pick. Tommy Emmanuel, Alex DiGrassi, Michael Hedges, Jerry Reed, Doc Watson. A lot. There's been a lot of great players that have that finger style, and now
Yeah,
you.
there's a whole school of it.
Yeah,
The one guy that I don't think you mentioned there, Ray, is Michael Hedges.
Michael Hedges, right?
So Hedges, is widely considered to be like the father
Mm-hmm.
of at least when it comes to steel string acoustic modern fingerstyle playing,
Right.
uh, rather than electric guitars. He really is considered to be the guy who kind of founded it, and it was Michael Hedges who led me down this road because I attended what tragically turned out to be his final concert in San Francisco.
Mm.
He had a car crash about 3 months after that show. It was
Wow.
at the Great American Music Hall in San Francisco, and died. But that concert, I went to it by myself, and it was, maybe 1 minute into the first piece that he played that, my head exploded, and my electric guitars were basically put up for sale the next day. No, seriously, that's what happened. That started me down this road of altered tunings and playing, both hands on the neck and all the harmonic stuff and the percussive stuff. And now there's a whole school of players, Andy McKee and John Gomm and Mike Dawes, and there's a whole bunch of them who are just massively talented players, and they all bow down to
Mm-hmm.
Michael.
Michael, yeah. That's incredible. That's got it's I'm a guitar player. I think that's hard to do. I don't think I can do it. I'm primarily an electric guitar player. I don't think I can do that.
No, I'm sure you could do it when you have people sort of teach you, how to
Yeah.
do it slowly, and eventually you can. I mean, it does expand the sort of vocabulary of sounds
Right.
in the instrument.
Can you play the banjo too?
No, no.
No. Huh.
no. I usually go lower in pitch so I can play bass.
Right.
I play guitars that I low tune. I don't know why I tend to constantly go to the lower end of the spectrum.
What kind of playing was Leo Kottke? Did he play a little bit of a
So
fingerstyle?
yeah, Leo is thought of as a modern fingerstyle player.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
He's a great player, man. I
Oh,
always admire him.
wonderful.
Yeah. Um, some of your influences, and you just mentioned that, but um, I also want to talk about Places, which was a critically acclaimed album. Really enjoyed Places as well. I mean, you deserve a Grammy. I mean, everybody else got a Grammy. It's your turn. um, talk a little bit about Places as well.
Well, so Places was my first foray into recording a solo album.
Right.
I was coming out of spending, a couple of decades accompanying a singer,
Mm-hmm.
which is great musical training, and I loved it. But I was kind of wanting to get back to instrumental music, which in many ways I think is really what I'm about. And so I had been sort of traveling this road of modern fingerstyle guitar and exploring it since I had seen that concert, that Michael Hedges concert. And I compiled and wrote the pieces for Places, and then ultimately decided, okay, well, it's time to go ahead and memorialize these things and get them down. So I recorded that record with Dan Feisley at his studio, with the exception of there's a very brief string quartet piece that's like a transition to the last piece on the album, and it was interestingly that little string quartet transition, which is about a minute long, that I had some people listen to the record and say, okay, you need to do more of that.
Mm-hmm.
Fine, nice guitar playing, but why don't you exercise your compositional chops a little bit, because something's happening there and we like it. So and these were people who I respected, so that led me to the next record, to Interconnected, which has then a 5-piece ensemble. That was the initial core of what came to be now MVI.
Right.
And so that was the sort of transition in the 3 albums.
And in Places, again, you were inspired by the great outdoors. You said you attended a National Outdoor Leadership School summer mountaineering course in 1974.
Yeah.
And you say you credit your wife with taking you to the high Sierra locations, and that your wife is an amazing mountaineer, right?
She has absolutely kicked my ass left, right, and center. Carry weight on the waves, snow camping, technical climbing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very spiritual, those places. That's more people need to get out of the house and do things like that.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. I can see how it would inspire your music, definitely. Are you going to do any touring? What's going on? Are you going to promote the album?
So we've got our first concert lined up for late August in the Bay Area.
Okay, good.
And then we're going to see how this is going to develop. So I'm curious and anxious and excited to play that show. Playing with a group of 7 people, especially when they are all exceedingly accomplished touring musicians who live in different parts of the country and things like that, is logistically challenging.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, so I have to deal with that aspect of it, and assuming the logistics come together, my opinion, and I don't think it's a rare opinion, is that the music does not come to life until you put it in front of an audience.
Right.
I have, Andy McKee is one of these great modern fingerstyle players. I've known Andy for several years, and Andy once referred to the recording process as the embalming of your music. This is why you want to kind of get it right, if you can. But yeah, so that's, all right, you've sort of set your music out in a finished form that people can listen to it. But until it gets in front of an audience, it's not fully alive, so to speak.
Right.
And so, yeah, I very much want to do that. And assuming I can pull all the logistics together and the financing and all that stuff that's required to make it happen, then my intent is to make it happen.
Yeah, it's not easy. It really isn't,
It's not. Even well-established groups will tell you now that, particularly these days, touring is just hard. It's hard, and the economics are hard.
Yeah.
All that. So, yeah.
Especially if you want to go to Europe too, I'm sure they would love to hear you.
I would so love to do that. I think this group would probably be well received. I think the music would be well received. When I was thinking about this, of course, I'm aware that you're writing music for 7 musicians. You're going to have these problems in terms of putting it together live. But on the other hand, I'm trying to think of, and maybe you can think of another group that's like this, an acoustic type of a group that has world music elements and improvisational elements, where you have, like a guy playing oboe and English horn out in front of the group. I'm thinking you got to go back to the Paul Winter Consort back in the 60s and the 70s.
That's true.
It's a sound that is just not heard a lot these days, and it's lush. You have heard the record. You get that violin, cello, and English horn sound together. It's just, to my ears, is just very attractive sound.
Oh, what comes to mind is a symphony. You're like a small symphony.
Yeah, right. That's how the group is conceived.
Yeah.
And it's a cousin of mine who's very into music and has followed my career. Actually, when I told him what I was writing for, he says, "Oh, okay, so you're heading for a full symphony orchestra."
Yeah. Or back in the jazz days, with Coltrane, Miles Davis, all the proficient artists, or Mahavishnu, those kind of guys, that really knew how to play their instruments,
Yeah, those guys are all huge influences.
And you don't get that anymore. You don't hear that anymore, which that's what's missing.
Well, really interesting you should say that. That is, it's something that I think about a lot. Occasionally, I still teach guitar, and of course, I talk to and communicate with lots of younger players and stuff like that. And yeah, it's a different ethic these days. John McLaughlin used to sit there for 8 hours a day. He didn't get that facility with his instrument, without doing the wood shedding. And the result is obvious. So it's a different kind of an ethic these days, and truthfully, it sometimes irritates me that
me too.
Players that they don't want to put in that kind of effort.
It's a shame. There are a lot of great players, especially guitar players. If you go on YouTube, some of these guys are incredible, but no one's going to know them. And maybe on YouTube, but that's about it.
Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of talent.
There is talent.
Yeah, and there's a tremendous amount of music, so it's very hard to get yourself someplace in terms of getting noticed. So yeah, all the more reason why I appreciate you're having me.
I bring a lot of there's a lot of great progressive rock artists, and they're putting out a lot of great albums now. So, and they're all over the world. So when they're not noticed here in the United States, I bring them on my show because they're so great at what they do. Somebody's got to hear this,
Yeah, I am a huge fan of progressive rock, and I
Yeah.
noticed on your website that you had interviewed Chris Squire.
Yep. Long time
Who
ago. Yeah.
is a long time ago, right? But
Yeah.
I mean, one of the gods of progressive rock.
Hmm.
I worshipped the guy, and you might be tickled to know that um, when I first recorded, because the guitar parts go down first in this music that I'm doing, and so I was recording the guitar parts with Dan, and in the first piece in High Desert, there's about a 16 bar section there that
Hmm.
when I recorded it with Dan, who of course also plays bass in the group, he's like, "Oh, that's the Yes inspired bars right there." And so when I wrote the chart out for him, actually, the chart's sitting right over here. I actually wrote on top of the chart for those 16 bars, Chris Squire Memorial Bass Bar.
It's
He
funny.
just he just loved it. He just loved it.
You can't help but pick up things that you've heard in the past. It just happens, you know?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you're copying them. You're just, it's just part of it. I mean, did you hear this lawsuit thing with Ed Sheeran and Marvin Gaye?
Absolutely.
He didn't sound anything like Marvin Gaye.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The people just trying to make money. But
Yeah,
the reality is that, for me, because I'm a composer,
right.
composers are thieves.
Yeah,
That's all.
exactly.
I mean, you're not going to say, "Oh, this wasn't my influence," or
Right.
"Yeah, no, I've never heard Beethoven. Who's that?"
Yeah,
No,
right.
you just osmose all this music over years and years and years, and it becomes, who you
Exactly.
are.
Well, the
So
Beatles
yeah.
stole from a lot of people, especially Little Richard.
Oh, yeah, from tons of people. Tons of
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it. I mean, that's how music develops. I
Right.
mean, all the greats, Beethoven and Mozart would tell you if they were here that they
That's right.
took, you know, just the way it went.
You made a comment about you would love to work with your son, who he's a filmmaker. Is your son a
Yes.
filmmaker? Really? Talk about that. What does he do? What kind of films?
He's studying now, so he's
Okay.
in the department at San Francisco State,
Right.
and yeah, he's done quite a bit of video production. He's worked with people in the hip hop community
Hmm.
in the Bay Area, and he's very talented. He's got just a great eye for photography, for film, and so yeah, I'm very much looking forward to seeing where this takes him.
Very cool. Yeah.
Really creative guy. Yeah,
Must be very proud. That's awesome.
I am super proud.
You mentioned some of your favorite film composers, and one of them was Marvin Hamlish. Marvin Hamlish was a client of mine in DC.
Is that right?
Yeah, nice guy. He was a really nice guy. Yeah, he's done a lot.
Yeah, yeah. I do like a bunch of film composers.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's just been so much great music. Obviously, it goes without saying that have been written for film scores. When I graduated, got my graduate degree in composition, I was just outside of Los Angeles at California Institute of the Arts, and
Right.
people were encouraging me to just stay in LA and do film composition,
Hmm.
which I've done a couple of film scores, mostly documentary type film scores. But just it wasn't what I was interested in doing. So
Exactly. Yeah, I could hear your music in a lot of films. Definitely.
great.
Yeah. Here's a question I ask everybody. I get some very interesting answers.
Okay.
You had a Field of Dreams wish, like the movie. It's one of my favorite movies. That's why I always bring this up. To perform or collaborate with anyone from the past or present, who would that be? And you can pick a couple of guys. That's all right.
Oh, anyone from the past or
Or
present?
present, right?
Wow. Whew.
Could be Tchaikovsky, Beethoven, Bach.
Well, okay, so J.S. Bach is my favorite composer, favorite musician,
Hmm.
he stands above everyone else in my opinion. So I've studied his music a lot. I play his music a lot. I've got his Goldberg variations sitting right here.
Oh, wow. Huh.
So, yeah, I visited his tomb in Germany.
Wow.
So, but Bach was an absolute legend as a keyboard player. Maybe, I mean, who knows? Because there's nobody alive that ever actually heard him. But from the historical record, it may be that he was the greatest keyboard player that ever lived. And of course, he played not only harpsichord but the church organ, right? So he had the feet and the hands going, and could improvise complete compositions on the spot. Allegedly, just perfectly. I mean, he would go to these churches, and people would give him a theme. It's like, okay, here's a 12-note theme. Create a fugue out of this 12-note theme, and he would sit there and improvise, a perfect 4-part fugue on this. For the first time, which it's an argument to maybe think that he was not from this planet.
Right.
Is the human brain, no, you can't do that. That's not right. So the notion that I could perform with him, that would be entirely way too scary. But if I could ever, be in his presence or hear him play, that would be probably my ultimate. And that would be true of many classical composers who I consider to be great influences: Mozart, Beethoven, Stravinsky, Maurice Ravel, Debussy. I mean, I could go on. It's a long list. So there's those guys, but then there's the whole popular music, world. I mean, people who are still alive today. I mean, if I could get up on stage with Paul Simon, I'd be, or Peter Gabriel.
Yep.
I'd be, beyond. So, and it's interesting you should ask that question, because I will actually this summer spend some time. There's an acoustic camp that's happening on Long Island with Chris Feely, the great mandolin player from Nickel Creek and Punch Brothers, and Chris is one of those very high level musicians. So I will get to hopefully play a little bit with him. We'll see how that works out, and that could actually happen.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I think Bach would have been into progressive rock. What do you think?
Well, a lot of progressive rock is
exactly
influence from him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Rick Wakeman, man, he's one of my favorite keyboardists, and he's a funny guy too. Hey, could you use a legendary drummer to collaborate with you guys in the future? What do you think? I know Billy Cobham.
Oh wow! Oh,
I mean,
God.
I think he would mesh well with you guys.
That is a legendary drummer.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting thing about drummers. I've worked with great drummers, and I have an amazing drummer in my group. Right. Because Gordy is an incredible drum set player. Just remarkable. And he's toured with the Doobie Brothers and the whole bunch of ours as a drummer.
Yeah.
But what's interesting with a drum set, and the reason why I'm not using a drum set on this record, is that a drum set takes up the entire sound spectrum.
Yeah, right. That's true.
You got everything. You got somebody on a kick drum, you're way down low, where
right,
in the bass register, and you got a hi-hat and cymbals and stuff like that, which are way up high in the top register. And so it's very intentional because I could have used a drum set very quickly, because I had access to a great drummer and a great studio. But and you might be interested, Ray, to know that there's parts of this album, The Gorge comes to mind, where we sort of improvised a drum kit. so what we did was we took a cajon. You
Hmm.
know what a cajon is? The box.
The box.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
Latin American wooden box,
Right.
and it's usually you sit on it. The player
Hmm.
sits on it, and they hit the sort of bottom of it with the palm of the hand here, and that's like the kick drum sound. And then you hit at the top of the drum, and it has a very thin, almost snare drummy type of a sound. So I said to MB, well, go ahead and bring your cajon, get a hi-hat, bring a hi-hat, and he has a pedal that can be adjusted to play in reverse,
Hmm.
regular drum kit. So he's got a pedal in front of him with the mallet
Hmm.
hitting the cajon. So he's got the kick drum on the cajon. He's got a hi-hat over here, and then he plays the snare sound at the top of the cajon. It's a drum set.
Hmm.
And
That's all you need.
yeah, yeah, and it's when you listen hard to it, you're like, what is that
Yeah.
going on? And that's what was happening. Yeah.
I love that. Are you going to experiment with other world instruments in the future? Are you still looking to, you know, create different sounds like that, or
I think that process is a sort of ongoing,
ongoing? Yeah.
continual process. I actually had an Irish player into
Oh,
my
very cool.
studio
I like that.
to possibly play uilleann pipes on some of this record, and then
Nice.
ultimately decided against that. So I would say yes. I'm always open,
Yeah.
um, but we do have with this particular group of instruments, we have a very broad palette
Hmm.
to work with. And I feel like it would take me, another 10 albums to
Yeah,
sort of exhaust all
that's
the
true.
colors that I can draw out of just these 7 musicians. Yeah, it's such a delight to have the ability to write for such
Yeah.
a
What a great
diverse group.
orchestra. Yeah. I forgot to mention you play sitar now too, right? Learn how
Well,
to
I
play
learned
sitar?
sitar. I studied sitar for about 6 years.
Really?
Yeah, I started in Boston
Huh.
when I was in college, and yeah, I was going to learn to play sarod initially, which is
Hmm.
more of a guitar-like string instrument. And then I found out that you would need to have long nails on the left hand on these 2 fingers to play
Right.
sarod. It's nails that go on the string, and
Hmm.
I'm like, oh, that would mean I'd have to give up guitar, so I'm not going to do that. And
Yeah.
then the guy I was studying with was like, here, try my sitar. And I'm like, you look at a full size sitar, it looks like it weighs 50 pounds,
Yeah.
but it's actually hollow teak.
Hmm.
And so you pick it up and it's like, whoa, wait a second.
Huh.
um, and then what led to my studying sitar. And I have not played my sitar in a long time now
Hmm.
because I've been so busy with this guy over here
Yeah.
writing all this stuff. But yeah, it's great just to have that
Sure.
in
It's a great
uh,
instrument. It really
yeah,
is.
oh, it's an amazing instrument.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many guitars do you have?
How many guitars do I have? Currently, I don't know. I'm gonna say a half dozen.
That's not bad.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not. I sold some electric guitars, and actually, Ty has one of my
Hmm.
acoustic guitars, the tabla player. So yeah, I've been trying to chill it down, but I do have some really super cool guitars still. 8-string guitar. I have a double neck
Hmm.
acoustic,
Hmm.
an Ovation. But I'm kind of like at the point now. I'm old enough where I don't want to have to schlep 80 pounds of guitars with me. So
Hmm.
I'm trying to get a little smaller.
Consolidate.
Yeah, back in the day when I was doing uh, the songwriter, guitar singer duo, I'd bring 5 guitars to a gig,
Mm-hmm.
and they'd all be tuned to different tunings and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
just have this whole, orchestra of guitars there.
Yeah. When you see Steve Howe on stage, he's got like.
Oh, forget
You
it.
mentioned the 8 string. That's a Roger McGuinn thing too. I think he does the 8 string. Yeah.
Yeah.
I talked to Roger, who's a good guy. Yeah. Another great acoustic player as well. Yeah. So what's your acoustic guitar of choice right now? What's your favorite?
Well, the guitar that I play most often is an instrument made by a guy named Michael Greenfield.
Okay.
Guitars from Montreal.
Mm-hmm.
Michael is an old friend of mine, and he's one of the top probably 5 luthiers in the world.
Hmm.
And I have 2 Greenfield guitars. I'm proud to say I'm endorsed by Michael. So yeah, I have the first guitar I got from him was his G4 model fan fret guitar, which unfortunately I don't have here in Bishop, or I would show it. But it's an extremely special instrument, and has inspired so much of this music.
Yeah. Yeah.
Improvising on that guitar is it's just a wonderful thing. It can handle any tuning,
Mm-hmm.
and it stays in tune. Doesn't matter how low you tune the low strings. And the interesting thing about Michael's instruments that I really have not found in any other instrument is that you can play way up high on the neck, way
Mm-hmm.
above the 12th fret, and not only does it stay in tune, but it still sounds extremely sweet. And as you know, because you're a guitar player,
Yep.
on an acoustic guitar, particularly, leaving the tuning issues aside, you get up above the 12th fret, and especially the low strings,
Right.
they start to sound very thin
Yep.
and unmusical.
Mm.
And so when I first got this guitar, and I'm up on the 14th, 15th fret, playing full chords, and it sounds sweet as could be, is like, oh my God, I have a whole nother.
Yeah.
This is the same instrument I'm used to playing.
That's hard to do.
Yeah,
it's really hard to do.
I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
I don't know how he does it. I'm persuaded that Michael goes in there late at night and,
Mhm.
and puts on like a magician's, hat, and
Yeah.
sprinkles some kind of weird magic dust on the wood. And I don't know. Nobody knows how. I call him the wood whisperer.
Yeah, wood whisperer. That's good. Do you have a 12 string as well? Do you own a 12 string?
I have a big Taylor 12 string.
Okay, cool.
That I haven't played in a long time.
Really?
It's a gorgeous instrument. It's
Yeah.
great, and I love that. Just
Yeah.
check it out.
I love the sound of a 12 string.
And my double neck is a 12 and a 6.
Right.
So actually, I guess I have 2 12 strings.
Yeah, that's right. Well, the album is incredible. I love it. It's now available. Are you working on the next one or not yet?
So I'm constantly, coming up with ideas, and then I record them on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's a bunch there, but at the moment, because we've got a show to play in August, I'm now into the making sure the charts and everything are good, and
Yeah.
arranging some of the music to have extended versions for the live show and stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah, I hope you come to Florida eventually. I know it's easier to go up and down the West Coast since it's close to home and everything, and probably a lot cheaper. But we'd love to see you in Florida.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I want to mention the new album by MVI, Mark Vickness Interconnected, entitled "In the Rain Shadow." It's available now. You can go on Spotify, Apple Music, and all the streaming platforms. And the CD is available at CD Baby, right?
Correct.
It's already released. It was officially released on May 15th. For more information about Mark Vickness and Interconnected, you got your website, www.markvickness.com. You're on Facebook. You're on YouTube, of course, to check out all your music. I also want to say very special thanks to the great Billy James of Glass Onion PR for arranging this interview with Mark. Mark, did we cover everything? Is there anything else we left out?
No, Ray, I just want to say again how much I appreciate this. It's just tremendous. I'm so happy to talk to you.
It's always great to talk to great musicians, and you got a heck of a band there. You really do. I admire you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
All
Good
right.
luck with the new album and in the touring, man.
Great. Thanks. Take care.
You too. Bye bye.
All right. Bye bye.